In the process of finalizing a comprehensive package of interventions to mitigate the expected impact of COVID-19 on our economy. This package will consist of various fiscal and other measures, and it will be concluded following consultation with business, labor, and other relevant institutions. It is clear that this disease will be extremely disruptive. Our priority must be to safeguard the health and the well-being of all South Africans, to minimize the number of infections, and to ensure all those infected get proper treatment. While we are battling a contagious virus, perhaps the greatest dangers to our country at this time are fear and ignorance. We must appreciate the extent of the threat that this disease presents. We must accept the anxiety that it causes amongst our people, but we cannot allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by fear and panic.
Now, for more reaction from the labour sector, we're joined by the South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Dr. Vavi, very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. So what do you make of the President's and the government's intervention with regards to imposing strict measures to fight coronavirus?
Today I thought that we saw leadership, and it's not something that we normally concede to very easily, but today we thought that the package that the President was publicizing on behalf of the Cabinet was a good starting point for South Africa. There's no other way. I mean, people may think that this is an exaggeration and that there's only 60 people that are affected. Forget it. Those 60 will become more numbers tomorrow. And as we can see, every day we're getting new numbers. If we don't do anything, we will find ourselves facing a major catastrophe. And the President and Cabinet intervention today was absolutely critical. And so we broadly welcome it. And we believe that the country have to respond to the crisis at least in 4 ways. One, must protect ordinary people. We know that the biggest way to protecting people is to address the issues of personal conduct or social distance. And we can only hope that that social distance is not going to mean an end of solidarity, in particular with the most marginalized members of the society, the working class and the underclass, people in this country who have never seen any employment opportunity, who live in the dumps to survive, who live in the corner of the street selling bananas, who have never worked in their life. We hope that that statement doesn't say this society must now get rid and forget about those people. The second thing that we think will be important is for us to protect our health workers. Yeah. These are going to be our frontliners when it comes to the immediate and the first contact between the people who will become ill and them as the health workers. And in that regard, we hope that government will make sure that all of the health workers are properly trained and that they are given protective clothing and that the levels of education amongst them are increased so that they can help address members of the public visiting the hospitals and clinics, not necessarily sick from the coronavirus, but just as ordinary interaction with ordinary people. And thirdly, we hope that the government's measures will protect the economy. And we must say we worried upfront. We heard that today the President had to postpone that press conference several times because he was consulting. Yes. We must put on record that SAFTU, the second largest federation in this country, was not amongst those that were consulted. We know that the Cabinet is going to be putting up a statement tomorrow at 10 o'clock based on this broad consultation. Again, we must put it on record that SAFTU, the second largest federation, which is the home of the industrial proletariat, which is the home of the biggest industrial unions that are organizing in the main, the blue-collar workers in the factories, in the mines, have not been consulted. And we suspect will not be consulted between now and 10 o'clock tomorrow. And yet we have very strong ideas about what needs to happen and to address the crisis at the economic level. You know, today we're smiling broadly. What the president was saying is exactly what any leader of any country should be saying. How we wish that those measures would have been announced a few days ago before we got to know about the first victim or the first person who tested positive from Italy. At that moment or before that moment, we should have immediately moved. And we're now sitting with 61 cases. It's going to increase every day, but it is better late than never.
No doubt business and labor will be affected. And as you mentioned, the industrial proletariat, as you've alluded to, will be the hardest hit, especially with the fact that, gatherings of more than 100 people will now be prohibited. What about the factory workers then? What about, the hourly pays and the daily pays?
Just imagine. We suspect that, again, the crisis is going to be resolved at the back of the workers. Firstly, already the capitalist system have put hundreds and thousands of workers into the vulnerable group. We're talking about the outsourced, the labor brokered workers, the workers on short term, and they're going to be the first to be thrown into the streets. Because the measures that we support the president was announcing today will immediately impact on the economy that is already on recession.
Sure.
The danger with this thing, if it lasts for a week or 2 or 4 weeks or more, then we're going to hit a scale of a recession that we last saw in this economy, in the world economy, in 1929 until 1933. This is where we're going to. And that's why we think that this crisis must not be wasted, and government must not do what it has been doing that has dismally failed the working class and the poorest of the poor. This is time to be bold, even at the economic level. The boldness that we saw today to address the issue of the social conduct between the citizens of the country and the citizens of the world is the type of boldness that we need to address the economic crisis that is going to immediately be our reality as we go forward. And this is some of the suggestions that we want to put forward. The first thing that I think everybody is now doing, even the most verkramte right-wing conservative governments in the United States and in the United Kingdom are agreeing that at this moment you need to get the money circulating in the economy. You need to address the issue of a stimulus package.
Yes.
And this government has been refusing to listen to us when we suggested that it is possible that you can put a 500 billion rand stimulus package, and we have put proposals as to where that money can be coming from. We hope that this government will now realize that if there is no money circulating to address the fact that the imports are going to dry into this economy, and that we need more aggressive localization in the economy to make sure that there is substitution of those imports that are going to have to dry up. If we do not take decisive action at this moment to build infrastructure, to expand our hospital capacity, to address the chronic staff shortages, the chronic equipment and other materials that we need in the hospitals that are in short, if we don't take decisive action to address all manner of other backlogs, the fact that, for example, 30% of our citizens do not have access to clean running water, thanks to the collapsing state of our local governments, and thanks to the disaster that have been visited to us.
But then how should we be cushioned? How should ordinary workers be cushioned against the effects of the devastating, as some people put it,
we think
devastating
that
effects
one
of
of
these
those
measures
must be introduction of the basic income grant immediately. The second one must be that we must all suspend payments of the interest rates in the economy. And thirdly, we think that we must drop the interest rates immediately. That's what Trump has done, drop the interest rates immediately. And the fourth is that we must make sure that money remains in South Africa. The exchange controls must be tightened up. And fifthly, the 320 billion rands that moves out of this economy through illicit cash outflows, we must take immediate steps to address that. And number six, we think that there must be an introduction immediately of the solidarity tax, of the wealth tax, to address the fact that there is a 1.4 trillion rands that is hoarded in the economy, where the multi-billionaire class will not invest in the productive sectors of the economy, but will rather keep their money in the banks, because our monetary policies in particular encourages them to rather make much more greater levels of profit by putting their money in the banks instead of investing it in the productive sectors of the economy. Now is the time. We hope that's what the cabinet will say tomorrow, for us to introduce tax to target in particular that 1.4 trillion rands that is sitting in the economy idling and doing nothing. We need that money now, and to build hospitals, to address the fact that already, look, this is the part of the crisis, and this, let's be honest, the crisis is going to impact differently on the basis of your color in South Africa, of your gender, of your age, and of your class, unfortunately.
How so?
How so? Because if you already have a crisis in the Tembisa hospital, where women are giving birth in the floor because there's no beds, it will impact on the much more greater at the negative level than the guys who take their kids to the Santin Clinic. On that basis alone, you remember there's only 17-19% of our people in the medical aid schemes, which themselves run dry 6 months into the year. And then the greater 85% of the population who rely on this dysfunctional public healthcare system that is already unable to cope. We just saw in January deaths of tens of kids in the Tembisa hospital. Now add the crisis of a coronavirus into that mix, and then you will see that the Life Esidimeni crisis will look like a Sunday school picnic. And that's why the measures
just before I let you go, Mr. Vavi, we don't have much time, unfortunately. You know, there have been concerns doing the rounds, the fact that some employers will not consider a quarantine or the quarantine period as leave. So, you know, they do not qualify for leave, basically.
Exactly. And immediately that will impact on the pay of workers. Now, if you reduce the pay and therefore the demand for goods in the economy, if you stop the imports, if you stop the tourists and movement of people, that economy will be thrown straight into a black hole. And that's what we fear. And that's why we're angry that the manufacturing sector unions are not going to be those that will be consulted today, and that government will continue with their net-leg arrangement where only the big public sector unions will be consulted to the exclusion of the industrial proletariat. And that's going to be very sad.
Okay. Since you haven't been consulted, aren't you going to take the initiative as a representative of
We issued a very comprehensive statement today, and we hope that the ministers will have a look if they don't want to touch our limbs. Maybe we already have a coronavirus. Right. We don't know. We can't be consulted. And but our doors remain open. We will be willing to engage with the government and on what must be the practical steps. We're already considering steps that we must be taken, and with the call that we want to make tonight to every union. Tomorrow morning, consider what you can do to pursue some of the steps that were announced by the president. We're mobilizing against the government austerity program. Government is attacking the public sector as we speak.
Let's leave it
the government is privatizing. We were hoping that by Saturday we will have people in the streets. We now have to reconsider all of those measures in the interest of the common good of all the country.
Mr. Vavi, your reflections are most appreciated. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary of SAFTU, giving SAFTU's reaction to the measures that have been imposed by President Cyril Ramaphosa to counter the effects of COVID-19. This is the Globe on SABC News. We'll be back shortly.